So guys, James here, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're looking at this awesome camera. It's the Lumix G6. Yes, old cameras in 2020 something, another video from us talking about old cameras. Here we go. So guys, let's just get straight into it. This is the Lumix G6, and as a lot of you may know, I'm obsessed with Micro Four Thirds cameras, in particular the Panasonic variety. And I often scour the internet looking for deals on cameras and lenses in the Micro Four Thirds world. And this camera came about on eBay for about 70 quid, which is a bargain. So I decided to grab it, and yeah, here are my thoughts. So before we get into my thoughts, actually, let's talk about the specs briefly. So this was released in 2013. It has a 16 megapixel live MOS sensor, which is the same as the Lumix GH2. It has a 1.44 million dot OLED viewfinder. It shoots full HD, AVC HD at 60 frames per second or 50 frames per second if you're in a PAL country. It's got a 3.5mm mic socket. It shoots 7 frames per second. It's got a fully articulated screen. First impressions with this camera is that it's very, very small. It's roughly the same size, perhaps a little bit taller than my GX7, which is a rangefinder style camera. It's roughly the same size as my Lumix GH2, and it's very true to the Micro Four Thirds system in the fact that it has a very small form factor. So if you're looking to pair this up with Micro Four Thirds lenses, you can have a very small setup like this with the Olympus 70mm f1.8, which is a phenomenal lens, by the way. You should all pick one up. For a guy with big hands, this isn't too much of a pain to hold. My hands do kind of come off at the bottom, as you can see there, but it's not too uncomfortable. It's far more comfortable than the GX7. To hold as you got that bit of a bump on the handle there. So there's a bit to grab onto, and like I said, I don't find it that uncomfortable to use and hold for most of the day. So pretty good handling all around. So this isn't what you would call a professional body. This is not weather sealed. There's not many dials on this camera, so there's a lot of going into the Q menu, and on the back dial there's no dial there. It's all buttons, you know, up, down, left, right kind of thing. You do have one dial on the back, and that is a multi-function dial. You kind of click it in to change from aperture and your shutter speed, which it's not the best. I'm not sure whether it's because of this particular copy of the camera I got. Maybe somebody before me has damaged this back wheel, but it just feels very clumsy. Doesn't really move when you want it to, and when it does move, it kind of skips values. It's just a bit of a pain to use, particularly if you're going to use gloves outside in the cold. Also, this doesn't have a dual card slot. It has one card slot, and that is in the battery compartment underneath, and I really hate that. It just makes it far more difficult to get if you've got this on an L bracket or even on a tripod, and you need to take this off the tripod to change SD cards. It's just a bit of a nightmare. The battery in this is the DMC BLC12, which is the same as the GH2 and the G80, as well as some other Panasonic cameras. And I find the battery life to be pretty good, actually, when shooting video or particularly stills. You do get an hour or so of good battery life, and for stills a bit more than that. So yeah, battery life on this is pretty good. Going back to the dials and things, this has a zoom lever thing on the top, which I don't use, and I don't know whether or not it's any good. Feels okay. I've never used it, to be honest. I think they should have dials, you know. They should have had a dial, and thankfully later cameras they chose to not go with this again. I think this is the only Panasonic mirrorless camera which has this on there. I may be mistaken. Let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, a bit gimmicky. Don't really use it myself. The button layout is pretty good. I think, yeah, pretty much everything is accessible with my right thumb. You got the Q menu, AFA E-lock on the top next to the dial. You got play, display, and then you got the cursor down the bottom there with the menu set in the middle. You got numerous function buttons as well. True to Panasonic, they do like to make sure you can customize their cameras, which is pretty good. So the button layout is pretty nice. You got the PASM dial on the top where you can have 2 custom profiles, which is handy if you're switching from 25 frames per second to 60 frames or 50 frames per second. You can switch the 2 rather than go into settings and change and everything. The only thing with this camera though is when you do switch from, so say you had custom one set to 25 frames per second HD and custom 2 set to HD 60 or 50 frames per second, your set shutter speed will change. And as we know with the 180-degree rule, you want that shutter speed to be specific for the frames per second which you're shooting. So for example, if I was shooting some slow motion at 60 frames per second or 50 frames per second, and my shutter speed was 100th, when I'd switch that to 25 frames per second, if I'm not careful, my shutter speed will still be 100th of a second and not at 1/50th where it needs to be for 25 frames per second. So that's something to bear in mind if you're planning to use this for video. Now the video codecs in this are far from beefy. You're talking around 27 megabits per second for your full HD footage, which by today's standards is quite low. You look at the G7, I think that's 100 megabits per second 4K, so it really does lack in terms of modern standards in the video department. But it does have that live MOS sensor, which is the same as the GH2, and it can produce really nice images. And as long as you're careful not to push too much in post and you get your white balance correct and you use nice lenses, you can get some really nice HD footage out of this camera. Now you don't get any log profiles with this. You don't even get the CND profile with this camera, but you can get multiple different profile pictures. Some are a bit gimmicky than others, but the one I particularly like and use is the natural profile. I find it gives a more of a natural look to the image, and I can kind of tweak that in post if I feel it necessary to do so. So not a lot in terms of picture profiles, but the natural picture profile for both stills and video, it looks pretty nice in all fairness. Now, one big concern with this camera, and I didn't realize at the time, but it seems to be a bit of an issue if you look online, is that this does have a microphone port on the front, which is great. And you can use your on-camera condenser little shotgun mics like the Rode Micro Go, and you get some nice audio. But if you use anything like the DJI wireless kit that I have, anything with a transmitter or anything that does audio recording with a line in, you get some really nasty feedback. I think it's feedback, I don't know what it is, but it just sounds awful. Here's a little example of me using this camera to do a sit down talking head video and not realizing this problem, and yeah, here it is. So guys, long time no see. Merry Christmas. Now you can help to eliminate this issue by either using like a Rode Micro Go and plugging it straight into the camera, or if you are going to use a DJI wireless mic system or something similar to that, then what you need to do is get a really long, couple of feet long 3.5 mil line in cable and put your your receiver at least a couple of feet away from the camera so the camera doesn't pick it up. That way then that does really reduce that horrible noise, but that's not really ideal, to be honest. So if you're lucky enough to have a wireless transmitter, wireless mic kit thing that I have, you can do the internal recording and you can just get around it that way. But you know, again, it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but That's something which I think you guys need to know if you're thinking about getting this for video. Also, another thing to consider with this camera, if you are coming from a video point of view, is that the HDMI, there is a HDMI on the side, and it's a micro HDMI, a mini HDMI port. Is that this mini HDMI port won't allow you to output a signal to a monitor. So if you've had any thoughts about using this for some serious video work with monitors and all sorts, you're kind of wasting your time with this because you won't be able to output your HDMI signal to a monitor. One really good thing about this camera though is the stills. Now it's not a epic sport or wildlife photography camera, but it is a very good camera for taking stills, particularly street or travel or general kind of photography. It does produce a really lovely image, and with the contrast detect autofocus, it's quite snappy, particularly in single focus mode. I've had a lot of fun with this, taking it out and about and getting some lovely images, and pair with the right lenses, you can get some really stunning results with this camera. So in conclusion, who is this camera for? Well, this is for anybody, I think, just getting into interchangeable lens cameras. Somebody who's not really into video, but somebody who would like to dabble in a bit of video and particularly enjoys taking stills. Anybody that's looking to go traveling or doing a bit of street photography or just general everyday kind of photography, and you don't want to break the bank, this is a really good bargain. And if you look on eBay and places like that, you can find one for sub £100, perhaps even with a lens. But you can get these, they usually go between 100 to say £150 body only on eBay, but you can find these for a bargain price. Also, the benefits of this is obviously it's Micro Four Thirds, so you're in that Micro Four Thirds system, and there are tons of lenses to choose for this kind of camera, and some of these lenses aren't that expensive, such as the 25mm f1.7 for about £100, £130 used. That would really bring this camera to life for stills and video. And you get much cheaper ones like kit lenses like the 14 to 42 for about 60 quid, something like that. So there's loads of lens options for this camera, and if stills is your thing, you could really use this as a gateway into stills photography. You could save money buying this body and then invest that money into the lenses, and then perhaps in the future upgrade this to perhaps like a G9 or a G9 Mark II even. So yeah, a really good stepping stone into the Micro Four Thirds system world. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this camera. But video users, stay clear. I wouldn't use this camera for video, serious video, or even amateur video, to be honest. There's far better options for around this price range, and particularly the Lumix GH2. You can hack it to shoot much better video quality. It's a 2.5mm jack, not a 3.5mm jack, but there's no issues once you get the adapter. You can rig it up, you can put a monitor on it, you can really, you know, get some stunning HD video with that camera. So video, serious video, guys, stay clear. But anybody who wants a bit of both, get into the mirrorless world, primarily shoot stills, and fancies just doing a bit of video for like holidays and stuff like that, then definitely consider picking up a Lumix G6. So guys, that's it from me. Don't forget to like this video, leave your comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, goodbye.